Dropped off.
So I think you might be nice.
We're good. So we have the green. The agenda says the question.
Hank watched the last
You know, it wasn't as good as
And now know where my chair announcement is.
one. He was rotating out and then had to see me reply to that.
Chair, you were.
Anyway, but he was. Yeah. I know a lot of times. Wait, how's your Carolina dog? Yes, that dog's a Carolina.
I just did.
Okay, good evening and welcome to the February 2nd, 2023 meeting of the Athens-Clarke County Planning Commission. For those of you viewing the meeting remotely, you'll find the meeting agenda on the Planning Department website at accgov.com/planning. For those of you attending in person, on the table by the door, you'll find a sign-in sheet and copies of tonight's agenda. For each agenda item, we'll begin with a report from ACC planning staff. This is followed by a presentation by the applicant not to exceed 10 minutes. We'll then hear from members of the public. 3 minutes are allowed for any member of the public who wishes to address the commission. When addressing the commission, please provide your name, address, and the nature of your interest in the project, and direct your comments to the planning commission and not to the applicants. Exhibits may be displayed by the applicants or members of the public at the podium. Written correspondence received by noon yesterday has been forwarded to the commissioners and is part of the public record. Any additional written materials to be placed into the record must be read during public comment for 3-minute time. For all speakers, please pay attention to the timing device near the director. The device will display a yellow warning light when you have 30 seconds left and then a red light when your time is up. After the public comment period, the applicant or their representative may request a 2-minute response. After that, the applicant will take their seat in the audience. At this point, the public portion for this agenda item is closed and the Planning Commission will proceed to discuss the item. We'll receive no additional public or applicant comments unless requested by a commissioner. Finally, please note that the microphones in this room are sensitive and the meeting is being broadcast live. Please turn off or silence your cell phones. Okay, so we'll get started with general business. So we'll start with introduction of staff reports and other documents submitted to the Planning Commission at this meeting into the official record.
So move.
Second. And all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Great. Okay, we'll move on to the minutes of the January 5th, 2023 Planning Commission meeting.
Move approval.
Okay,
Second.
all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
And opposed? Okay, great. And anything from May Courts?
No report.
Okay, great. We'll get started then with our first item under new business, which is 286 and 296 Classic Road. We'll start with a staff report.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Stephen Jaques, staff, part of the ACC planning staff. Here to present the report on 286, 290, and 296 Classic Road. The applicant has requested to rezone the property from employment industrial to RM2, residential mixed density -2. This requires a corresponding land use change to the future land use map from general business and employment center to mixed density residential. The applicant is proposing 86 3-bedroom townhouse style multifamily units, 258 bedrooms in total. These units will be arranged with either rear or front loaded garages, depending on where they are in the site. There is a clubhouse with a green and I believe a pool that is proposed, and a stormwater basin as well. This is an aerial of the site as it exists today. You can see that it is a little bit, there's some clear ground here. There's some houses right in there. There's a residential subdivision here. Everywhere else is basically undeveloped. You can see that Jennings Mill Parkway runs through here. And then there's some commercial and commercial and light industrial uses along here. So as you can see, the property is mostly undeveloped at this point with some residential houses on it. Next slide, please. This is what the future land use map on the left is existing right now. Here's the property. As you can see, it's split between employment and general business, as is the rest of the property around here. The applicant is requesting to, on the right, move it to mixed density residential right there. As you can see, there's nothing directly adjacent that is mixed density residential, so this would create an isolated district, but there are properties along Jennings Mill Parkway that do carry this category. Next slide. Similar story for the zoning. Right now, you can see these properties on the left are zoned EI, and they would move to RM2 on the right. Everything else around it is CG and EI. We would note that that CG right in here is all residential. It's a residential subdivision that was built at the time when we allowed those things to be built in CG zones. Those are no longer allowed, but that's a legacy project from back in the day. Next slide, please. However, when you zoom out, here's what the future land use looks like. You can see that we have Atlanta Highway running through here, the loop off to your right. Of course, Atlanta Highway heavily focused on commercial. And then the purple would be our employment center. And then the yellow are various residential future land use categories. Now, when this was drawn up, originally approximately 20 years ago, the idea was that Jennings Mill Parkway, running through here, would become an alternative to Atlanta Highway. It would carry a lot of commercial and industrial uses, hence why the future land use is arranged that way. This was contingent upon building a flyover across the loop here. Well, as we all know, that was not built. The DOT chose to construct that flyover where the Oconee connector is. And as we've seen, it's attracted development to that area. And in the following 20 years or so, we have not gotten the development that was intended here. Rather, we have gotten some residential development that has started to encroach on this area. Next slide, please. This is what the actual land use looks like. The light blue is residential. The green is industrial and the red is commercial. The gray, most notably, is undeveloped. So you can see that this site, right in the center, outlined in the red and black there, is currently residential, and it's mostly surrounded by undeveloped properties. On the left and the right of Jennings Mill, here and here, you can see that residential has moved into the area. And so the area is now more of a commercial residential mix than the industrial commercial mix that we had envisioned. Next slide, please. This is what it looks like on the aerial. You can see several large residential developments here, 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 and then there's one that's been approved right there. Next slide. This is what the proposal is for the site. The developer is proposing to bind the layout here. So they are all the same type of units, the 86 three-bedroom townhouse units. They're considered multifamily by our code. There's going to be some that face on Jennings Mill Parkway up here. Then there's going to be an alley here, roadway, alley. And so there's going to be some rear and front-loaded townhomes there as far as where the garages are. There's also a center green clubhouse pool kind of area right here. Next slide, please. These are the architectural elevations. They're not binding at this point, but they are illustrative of what the developer is intending to do. On this slide and on the next one, you can see that there are some front-loaded designs there as well, where you have a garage door in the front of the unit. Next slide. So the staff report, if you noticed, the main issue here is a land use issue, not so much the zoning issue. The land use, as originally envisioned here, was more focused on job generation. That's still, in our comprehensive plan, something that's important. It's listed as something that's very important for Athens, job generation, but also housing. So this represents a trade-off between job generation potential and housing, both of which our comprehensive plan calls for and says Athens needs these things. we think that mixed density residential as a future land use along Jennings Mill Parkway could be compatible. It makes sense to reconsider the future of this area because it has not developed as expected. And so we want to point out to Planning Commission that if you believe that this area is, the future here is industrial and commercial, we would say to reject this request. If you believe that this area is going to be residential and commercial, we would say that this is be open to approving this request. The site plan itself cannot be approved as binding until resolution of some of the code compliance issues. This is getting a 2-cycle review, so we're just reviewing it with comments at this time. So there's time for the applicant to correct those on their master submittal. The main thing is we would like to see on site an enhancement of the central open space there with more park-like features, program design elements that really encourage people to use that space as a park in an area where we don't have a lot of public parks, instead of just being kind of a grassy lawn, leftover kind of space. We'd like to see it really become a nice central focal point for the community. But that concludes the staff report. Again, we're just reviewing it with comments at this time, and then the applicant will be back for a second time for an actual vote.
Next, we'll hear from the applicant.
Good evening, commissioners. Thank you for taking the time this evening to our proposal for the community we call Township. My name is Jeff Kuhn with Stratus Development Group. I'm based here on Prince Avenue in Athens. The site may look familiar, as 2 other groups have made proposals on the site in the past. From my understanding, the proposals were seen in a favorable light. There were some question on the tree canopy. We've fixed those issues with this plan. And those groups, in addition, could not make the site work financially. And hopefully we can make something work here. We have fine-tuned earlier iterations of this plan, and the revised version is here today. The goal of Township is to provide an attainable rental housing solution to a wide spectrum of Athens residents. The 86 proposed dwellings are organized as townhomes, which is a product type that we see a little bit in Athens, but not much of. The goal of the layout is to allow residents direct access to both passive and active amenity spaces, and to their car for loading groceries, for instance, and to the outdoors to allow pets to get outside easy, and grilling and things of that nature. You're not in a big apartment complex. The cottages at Ridge Point community nearby it's been very popular, and we intend to create a community here with a similar desirability. Yet we have different floor plans. And our goal is to make this at a lower price point as well. The development is not intended to be student focused, and given the fact that it's 11 miles from UGA's campus, we don't see that as even being a possibility. We have been in the Athens market for nearly 20 years now. We've taken pride in delivering a quality product in every project that we undertake. We differ from many other groups in that we oversee the construction ourselves, our own projects, manage our own communities. We're long-term owners, so it's something you don't often see. We also take pride in the workmanship of what we do, and we use long-term materials. We use party plank and stone and brick, and so our goal is for this to look great in 5 and 10 years, and not for it to be an eyesore at that point. We also have intentionally limited surface parking here and added some connectivity to surrounding parcels to ease traffic flow per some planning guidelines. The Jennings Mill corridor was originally slated for commercial use, as noted before, which is the reason for our rezone request tonight. The flyover bridge for Jennings Mill, of course, was never built, and so this road essentially connects nothing to nothing. We have seen a lot of residential development in this area, both right next door, a couple blocks away, a quarter mile south, quarter mile west. There's a lot in this area, and it's all proven to be very popular with residents. The proposal does follow one of the key objectives of the 2018 comprehensive plan, which is, and I quote, to increase the supply and variety of quality housing units at multiple price points and multiple locations to suit the needs of a variety of households. End quote. This is being done in an area that we feel is appropriate for residential housing, that does not infringe upon legacy neighborhoods or any conflicting uses. We have been working with the adjacent neighborhood to work together with access and buffers and landscaping to be good neighbors there. We do humbly ask for your consideration of this proposal, and without further ado, I'll turn this over to our engineer, Frank Pittman, for some more insights.
Thanks, Jeff. I'm Frank Pittman. I live in Watkinsville, but have been around Athens for a long time. As Jeff mentioned, you guys have seen this twice, I think, within the last year. There were some tree canopy issues and some financial issues that caused those to kind of die. We tried to, when my client picked this up, we tried to see what the issues were before and try to work with those. So what we've proposed here is not a plan development like the last one, but we are offering up a binding plan so that everybody knows what we're getting, but we're trying to work within the code. And so we're meeting all code requirements for this zoning class and thus don't need a PD, but we're offering up a binding plan so that everybody knows what they're getting and the neighbors know what they're getting. As Jeff mentioned, we have had some good conversation with the subdivision to the east. We do have to get some easements from them to tie on that road and also get to the sewer. We have offered up some additional landscaping, which doesn't show on this plan, but will show on the second submittal of this binding plan. A bit of additional evergreen landscaping along the southeastern side from our development so that there's even more of a buffer to the neighboring subdivision. We feel like this is a logical transition from, even though the single family subdivision is zone CG, it is a single family subdivision. And as you all know, you don't want industrial in your backyard. And as this is zoned today, this could be an industrial, light industrial, but still industrial, built in these people's backyards. We feel like this multifamily development would be a logical transition from the single family to a multifamily project to what could be still light industrial to the west, even though industrial really hasn't thrived in this area. And that's really due to, there's no transportation corridor for trucks and stuff to get out. They don't want to go down to Jimmy Daniel and go through that, which is really a residential area as well. And as was mentioned from Jeff and Stephen, the flyover hasn't been built, more than likely will never be built at this point. So we have also, I've had conversation with all the staff that have made comments. We don't have any issues with any of the comments. We're willing to work through all those. And we're really here just to ask for y'all's feedback to try to work towards creating a great project for the west side of Athens. And we're open for any questions y'all may have. I think my other client, Blake Underwood, wants to say a few words as well, but we're here for any questions, feedback. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Blake Underwood, local resident here of Athens for 20 years, over 20 years, I guess now. These guys did a tremendous job of laying it all out there for you. So I'm not going to take up much of your time and we can move on. But I do want to add that, I've directly worked with the adjacent neighborhood to the east, the single family neighborhood. And unfortunately, the HOA president is not able to attend tonight and give his feedback on the community. He ended up with strep throat this week, so we do expect them to be here for the next round of, the next meeting, and they will be supporting this community. And, they were very adamant that, they don't want any industrial next to them. They don't want any commercial next to them either, whether it be retail in like a commercial general neighborhood, just due to the nature of the street and how everything's going there. They just don't feel like it's going to be a very desirable commercial area. So they were actually in support of the previous plans, and they are actually more supportive of our plan with the extra buffers that we provided, along the eastern property line, and additional trees that we're going to be showing you next round. So yeah, that's all I got. Thank y'all.
Thank you. Okay, we'll move on to the public comment portion of this meeting. Just as a quick reminder, this is a comments only agenda item, so we're not taking a vote on this tonight, but this is the first of 2 times that we'll see this, and we take public comment at both of those times. Is there anyone here who wishes to speak in favor of this project? Is there anyone who wishes to speak in opposition? Okay, great. We'll move it behind the rail to planning commission discussion. Would anyone like to start us off?
Yeah, I'll just, my recollection is when we saw this last time, we tabled it because there was, basically it was just tree canopy. I think we talked through the future land use, and there was a lot of support for changing that and for the rezoning, but they were nowhere near the tree canopy. I did want to ask you, Brad, on the site plan, it shows that they're a lot better than the last time we saw it, but they're not quite at the 25% that RM2 requires. Do they need to be requesting a waiver of?
If they are not at the conserved canopy allowance, it could go through an administrative waiver process. We do that occasionally. It's a straight rezoning with a binding plan, so they don't have the ability to ask for waivers or variances. And I think they're committed to bringing you a product at the next meeting. Well, it'll be 2 meetings from now. Just going to check all those boxes. I think they wanted to go through clean. So my assumption is we will probably be at 25%.
Okay.
That would be my encouragement to them. I would not have any interest in them presenting you a plan, y'all approving it as binding, and then needing me to later do an administrative waiver or something. So we strongly encourage them to meet the minimum conserved canopy.
Okay. So you said that administrative waivers of conserved tree canopy is something that you are able to do and sometimes do. But am I hearing you right that you would hesitate to do it here? You want them to comply, or it looks like they're 2.5% off. So
I mean, I would hesitate to do it unless there was some directive from this body as part of their motion to approve that they would be, willing to allow that to occur. Generally what happens with these administrative waivers to conserve, there's a give and take. We can't meet our conserve, but in turn for that, where our conserved and planted is supposed to be 50, we're giving you 55 or 60 because we're not meeting the full conserved. But I would imagine that they will come back at 25.
okay, thank you. I appreciate that. As I recall, when we talked about it last time, because it's EI now, the current conserved is 5%, and they're asking for a rezone that would require 25. And so I'll just state for the record, since the applicant wants comments, that I'd be I think 22.4 or whatever they're at now sounds like a lot better than the current zoning, and I'd be fine with that. If they're unable to do it, I don't know that I can speak for anyone else in that respect, but if they're able to hit 25, great. If they're at 22.4, that's all right with me too. I'd rather have however many townhomes they're doing than lose 5 homes for 5 families to conserve a few more trees. So I started with that just because that's where we kind of ended up last time. I guess I'll just also add that it seems like industrial is not going to happen on Jennings Mill for all the reasons that Stephen and the applicant mentioned. And the direction of that corridor does seem to be moving toward housing. And so I'm very supportive of the idea of putting housing there. So I think this looks like a pretty good project.
We'll go to Katie and then Lucy.
I wanted to say, I do also support the change to residential, based on all the evidence we've been hearing and the plan for the transfer station, the bus transfer station at the mall. I want to ask staff, what might be the benefit of having a binding site plan, assuming it does get rezoned to RM2? Does this plan offer more to the public than, or to the neighbors than our guidelines for RM2?
At this point, I don't know that it offers more at this point, but I think you've got to view it in the appropriate context that if they showed you this as a concept plan and it was approved as RM2 and commission votes on it and Mr. Underwood walks out the door the next day and somebody calls him with an offer that he can't refuse to build conventional 4-story apartments on it, he is under no obligation to build what he showed you without doing what he's doing. So I think that's the purpose of what they're trying to do, is saying, we want RM2, we're willing to commit to this housing product and type for assurance to the neighborhood next door, as well as the community, that it will be what you see. But we don't need a PD because our intent is to build it within the limits of the design standards, and they're not asking for any waivers. So that's kind of a roundabout answer, but it's not like a PD where many times an applicant will come in and they're in need of several waivers, modifications. And so they're trying as a community benefit to offset that with more trees than they're required, or there's more impact than they would have to do, but they also need something. I think this is just an assurance to the adjacent neighborhood and the community that we intend to build what we're telling you.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, thank you. The one item that kind of, gets in the way of this with me, I think this is a pretty good design, is the common area, the park, whatever we're calling it. And I would like to see that as having more programming. It doesn't have to be, show me exactly where things are going to be, but I'd like to hear what they're talking about going into that area. Is it going to be, a children's area? Will there be a dog park? This sort of thing. It's just, I'd like to know what their plan is for using that space. And it's, this is a conceptual clubhouse. And sometimes we've seen clubhouses be conceptual to the point that they never get built. And, that's sort of the thing I'm talking about, is if it's a clubhouse, it's a clubhouse. But if it's just a concept that there might be a clubhouse there at some future date, I think that needs to be clear. And that's for the people who are buying into this development, that they have expectations. But I would like to have a better idea of what will actually be programmed into this park area, if you want to call it a park or a common. Okay?
Sarah?
So 2 things that I saw brought up, one by staff and one by the applicant, that I find very interesting and I think are related to each other. Staff's request or comment that perhaps there could be more amenity space, more amenity space, I should say, in this and less, I don't know, housing, undeveloped, open space, whatever trade-off would have to happen to get that. That connects with, in my brain, to the story that the applicant is telling of working with the HOA to be, good neighbors and to have lots of buffers and landscaping. And it sounds to me like, that's the cost of the HOA's support in this matter. And I think that they do, want to be good neighbors, and that's between them and the HOA. But both of those things make they make me think about what makes good neighborhoods. I am generally opposed to a call for a better private park, which is what these are, which is what any amenity space in any of these housing developments is. Private park is no substitute for a public park. I think about, the neighborhood that I grew up in. It was just this traditional neighborhood, like 1940s homes. There's a public park somewhere. There's no, amenity space near us. You play around other people's houses. You play in front of their garages, in between streets. We have some nice like right-sized cul-de-sacs, I think there. Meeting people and forming connections with people does not happen in private parks. From what I have experienced and what I know. So I would hope that we would not sink this for lack of a private park. And that connects to the idea of these buffers and landscapes, which comes up in a lot of our items. So I'm just gonna have a little timer going so that I don't talk too long. You put up a buffer there, and all of a sudden, if you have cut off a lot of, thinking about kids specifically, but you cut off a lot of friend-making ability with the other neighborhood. You've sequestered, you've isolated, you've made it so that people kind of need to drive to see their friends next street over. You kind of get rid of the informal pathways that can grow organically, cut off that growth. Because I guess people are afraid of noise or of someone walking on their lawn. I think that we lose a lot more in connection than we gain in security when we do that, when we encourage that kind of thing. I'm not saying that we should throw this out for that reason either. Just those two things seem connected. Also, when we saw all that undeveloped land, what would be really cool there maybe is a public park. What if we had a public park? I would much rather see that happen and have more people living here that could go to it.
Thank you. I had a couple comments. I think for me, we've already talked about that a lot of us, at least the last times we've seen this, have been pretty comfortable with the idea of this becoming residential. I know I am comfortable with this becoming residential, but I think in that same vein, I could see this development being part of a larger trend to see more residential in this area. And I think the reason I would want to see a binding site plan is I want to see that I don't want this to become apartment land. I mean, I think, Sarah, you kind of touched on it, where you have these like apartment complex. Like, I think of these sort of dead areas of cities that I think we've all been in, where there are these kind of insular apartment complexes. And I guess what I'm trying to say is that I want to see some thought given to how could we be part of building a neighborhood out here in this area that hasn't had that before. And I think to me, that would be the value of a binding site plan, is to see this body as a way to bring that about. It is and to sort of see the role that design can play in building neighborhoods, because otherwise I think we could accidentally see these chopped up apartment complexes. So I think it's up to the designers to figure out exactly how to do that, but I think a little bit more openness to the areas around it. I hope that we think about this area generally in the comp plan and the growth concept stuff, because the idea of getting a public space out there in some way, if we're going to start having lots of people live out there, I think that would be good. But anyway, I just think there's some ways that could be considered. I also wanted to just agree with the staff comments about, and Lucy, the kind of more thought given to programming and it kind of all plays into what I'm trying to say. Like, you're part of building a neighborhood out there. So show me a plan that shows me you're thinking about that.
just a slight addendum to that, and I'm not putting this on for people who are having to work on the comp plan to get it back to us and all that. Coding is a real important part of how you implement a comprehensive plan. It's heard me talk about this for years. And I hope that one thing that will come out of the comp plan and out of the updates, are we doing comprehensive rezoning on county?
The 28.
Coding will make a huge difference on how these sorts of areas develop, and including what right now is vacant land around it. That will make a huge difference. So I would like the planning commission to think very carefully about updates in codes, form-based codes. Let's say it again for the 20,000th time. And I think that can make a huge difference on how we see all of these areas of there develop.
Totally agree. Kristen?
So just, because I really don't have a very strong opinion about this development. But what you were saying, kind of, the one nagging thing I have is its relationship to Jennings Mills Way. Because I feel like that just kind of has no personality, probably because of the zoning, because we kind of created this road without personality so that businesses could just move in and take over. And with it changing, I guess sort of my challenge, and I feel like I had maybe a similar challenge to the other development down the street too, which was like, help create the personality of this street. Like I guess what I don't want to see out of this development is just one more carved up plot with trees along the outside and we don't know what's happening behind there. Like if we're creating another neighborhood, let's create the larger neighborhood. But there's some opportunity to have people walking and biking along Jennings Mill. Like it could be like a neighborhood, a larger neighborhood, not just these little insular pockets.
You know, I look at this and I like this because I like the change. I feel like that's kind of where this is going. And I believe the last time, one of the things we heard from the neighborhood was the commercial up front, that they really didn't like the commercial up front. And I think this gives that street with the townhomes facing Jennings Mill Parkway an opportunity to have that neighborhood street feel. And I like the commitment to say they're going to build what they're going to build. I look at the amenities in that area and I caution, to me, I'm one of those less is more if you're building affordable, because when you start having an HOA that keeps going up, your rent can stay low. But if the HOA is getting close to your rent, then you've just made somebody not affordable. So I'm one of those people. Yes, let us know what the plan says, but I'm a less is more type in somewhere like this with open green space, because if you start adding too much, you've got to pay for it, and that's got to come somewhere. So it's going to come back to the people living here. And if you're looking for workforce housing, or if you're looking for good apartments for what's the surrounding area, I think less would be more there for me personally when I look at that.
Else?
I really liked what you said about less is more. Echoing that, when you have that more, and when you have the HOA involved, it really becomes kind of the institutionalization of play and the institutionalization of community, which kills both of those things. And I just really wanted to say something I was surprised about, which is that I really like the way that these front-loaded garages look. I hope that those stay. I think we're always on here talking about how much we hate the look of front-loaded garages, and they're normally terrible. But these ones, I think, the scale that they have with the house, I don't know. They make me think of a city. Cities have front-loaded garages too, and if we're gonna have them, I like it.
Anyone else have a comment you want to add? Katie?
Yeah, I wanted to follow up on several things people said, especially when you talked about neighborhood design. And I agree, this would be a great place. If we're going to have a binding site plan, it'd be great to have a standard or high neighborhood design. And I would encourage everyone to Google traditional neighborhood design and look at some of those elements. It's usually, narrow streets, especially with on-street parking sometimes, that are framed by buildings. So this is so many meetings. And it often does have a variety of housing types. I'd refer everyone to Athens Middle Housing Study if you haven't read it already. I don't think townhomes are the only only multifamily option for a neighborhood scale, maybe the neighbors would be okay with, a 3 or 4 story building that doesn't loom over their houses, but, still is part of a nice network of small blocks, narrow streets. This is the kind of high quality design that I think would be great if, actually, if the county had, gone ahead and, coded for long ago. And I'm not sure our RM2 would produce that right now. I think the things that I personally find undesirable in our traditional apartment design is the massive apartment buildings, the massive surface parking. I think it is okay to have 3 and 4 story buildings, especially if there aren't large surface parking lots, if you have the on-street parking. And then, yeah, again, fronts and backs. I think this plan it kind of gets that. Again, the garages don't dominate as much as they could. But on the other hand, I see a lot of these units with their front doors on the opposite side as the garage, but they don't seem to face anything. They just face this kind of leftover space. If it was a front door, even if it wasn't on a street, you would expect walkways and landscaping, just a sense that, you're walking up to your front door. So I think that's a part of this traditional neighborhood design that people tend to like and walk in and find, and that is really sustainable. Yeah, that's me.
Did I see another hand, Joey? Did you have something?
Well, I was just gonna say, I like hearing the type of exterior materials to make it more of a community with the brick and the hardy plank and stone and whatever they choose. So I'm looking forward to seeing what kind of designs they're gonna feature in that.
Okay, anyone else? All right, thank you. We'll move on to our next item. That's 102 Lavender Road, and 3 addresses off Jefferson Road, and we'll start with the staff report.
Good evening, everyone. This has 4 addresses, as you can see, but it is also known more popularly as Oak Grove out here at Jefferson Road in Lavender. The applicant is requesting to amend a previously approved plan development, in this case, a commercial general plan development. Specifically, they are asking several things. The main thing is to reduce the buffers along Jefferson Road and Lavender Road. Specifically, they are asking to reduce the depth of the buffer from 50 to 40 feet along Jefferson and from 25 to 20 feet along Lavender. They're also requesting to thin out some of the plantings there. They are also adding about 40 parking spaces and modifying out parcel building footprints. I will note, particularly when we get into the site plan, that they're not focusing on the larger Oak Grove Shopping Center residential neighborhood project here. They're really, this request is really just about the out parcels, the 4 out parcels right along Jefferson. And the purpose of this amendment is to accommodate building templates of potential tenants, national chains and the like. This is an old aerial of what the project once was. If you go out there now, you will see that there's a public shopping center. There's a large parking lot. A lot of that stuff is under construction, nearing completion. So this area is graded off and cleared, and there's multifamily housing coming out of the ground and the plans moving forward there. So if you look at the top right here, you can see this is the original Oak Grove Phase 1. Then you can see more Phase 2 here, and then it is expanded into this area now. This is the future land use. It's general business. The applicant is not proposing to change that, so it will remain that way. And the same thing goes for the zoning. It's CGPD. It would remain that way. This is the overall site plan for Oak Grove. You can see there's multifamily back here at the top. This is where the future Publix grocery is going to go right here. We've got the parking lot. We've got commercial buildings around here. There's a little green here. And then we're going to focus in on these areas right here at the bottom, the out parcels. And here's a zoomed in look of what that is. You see there's 4 out parcels here, and here's the buffer, the 25 or in the proposed 20-foot buffer, the proposed 40-foot buffer, and then the 4 different out parcel buildings right there. You can see arrows showing that they want to orient, or they're proposing to orient these front doors inward, which is consistent with the original plan. But they want to make sure that that they are indeed going to orient inward. We have some questions about that as a staff. Next slide. This is a comparison of what is approved out there right now. So there's some subtle differences. You can see the buffer is a little bit wider. It's 50 feet and 25 feet. You can see some of the buildings have changed their orientation, and between those 4 parcels, they've added about 40 spaces, going from about 90 to 130. Particularly where they're exchanging buffer space along here for some extra parking there. The buffer is the primary request here, and so we're trying to give you do our best to give you a comparison of what was approved versus what is proposed. Here we have the approved 50-foot buffer type A for Jefferson. Those large circles are going to be the trees, in this case oaks, and then small circles are going to be smaller shrubs and very small trees. This contrasts with the proposed buffer, and I apologize, the applicant in their application did not have the same scale on their drawings. So this is what would be proposed. The main thing here is that you're getting a 45% reduction in oak tree plantings. So while there are a lot of bushes there, you are getting a reduction, particularly in the large plantings that would do the most screening. So this is the proposed buffer along Jefferson. Our next slide has the approved buffer along Lavender. Again, same thing. Large circles represent large trees, and then the smaller circles are a collection of shrubs and bushes. And this is the proposed one. Again, the scale's not the same, but the main thing here is, again, a 37% reduction in oak tree plantings. So we're thinning out the biggest pieces of that buffer, in addition to shrinking. We saw a very similar request here a couple of months ago, and our staff report contains a lot of the same language and a lot of the same observations because they still apply. We would say that this is consistent with the future land use map and the zoning map. Again, they're not requesting changes here. It is somewhat inconsistent with the 2018 comprehensive plan. We're trading green space for parking. The comprehensive plan calls for more infill development rather than expansion out into the edge, greenfields. There are some code compliance issues here, relatively minor. Next slide. The main thing here, and what we want to draw your attention to and open for discussion, is that we view this proposal as being inconsistent with the original intent of the Oak Grove plan development. It was originally intended as a kind of new urbanist community, very people-centered, de-emphasize the automobile, and it has over the years evolved from that vision towards a more conventional suburban auto-oriented space. Again, trades green space for parking. There was no giant parking lot serving the grocery store in the original submittal. The buffer is not just a buffer for a buffer's sake. It was actually created with a very specific intent, which was to create separation between Oak Grove and Jefferson Road. Originally, there was going to be the residences, and they would be served by a commercial town square oriented around a town green. And so this buffer was created to preserve Jefferson Road as what it is, designed for a high-speed regional transportation route between Athens, I-85, and Gainesville. And it also protected the neighborhood commercial square from the high-speed traffic there. Not really a pleasant thing to mix. And so narrowing this buffer starts to mix those things and blur the lines there. And when you do that, amending that plan to attract drivers coming off of Jefferson Road rather than just serving nearby residents, trying to draw from a wider area, you could potentially degrade Jefferson Road's ability to function as a high-speed regional transportation route. Once you add those local trips, those people coming from nearby, that adds traffic and congestion and slows down the folks who are trying to go regionally. And when you add more turning motions or people slowing down, you add some complexity to the roadway there. And in a high-speed environment, that could also raise the risk of more crashes. So this buffer has a bigger intent than just a buffer. It's a key part of the original intent. Additionally, this could place some additional pressure on the adjacent green belt, which is there's some parcels across Jefferson Road and very close by that are part of our green belt. So in light of all these things, staff is recommending a denial of the project based primarily on its inconsistency with the original intent.
Thank you. Okay, we'll go with our applicant presentations.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Justin Crichton, and I am a senior planner with W&A Engineering. Our offices are at 355 Oneida Street in Athens, Georgia. I think pleased to be before you this evening representing this request. I think staff did a good job describing the overall scope. One point of clarification, however, so the 20-foot buffer that is along Lavender Road, the request to take it to 20, that is currently what's on the plan. So you see the comparison there. The scale between the two, and staff can confirm this later, but that buffer is currently 20 feet and that is not being requested. The width of the buffer is not subject to this request. It's only the 40-foot buffer that we're requesting. So on this comparison slide here, it shows the impacted area. So the orange, the highlighted area is the edge of the 50-foot buffer. And the prototype buildings that are shown on the plan there, we received from a separate civil contractor, and they do seem to conflict with the overall intended interior orientation of the buildings. But they do show those primary orientation arrows, like Stephen pointed out. So that indicates which way they're intended to address the street. So the developer, who's also here with me tonight, is committed to working with staff to ensure that those buildings do face the interior and remain that way. So the additional required space, I think it was slide, please, does offer an opportunity for us to redesign the buffer along those 4 out parcels. So the proposed buffer that on top, as you see there, proposes a naturalized rather than a mass planting approach to provide a visual screen. So this tries to give you an idea of how they compare. So if you look at the slide and then the next one, there's not a significant difference between the two. So back to the previous slide, I'm sorry. So essentially what we did was took the overall height of those trees probably in about 5 years and tried to model them in 3D based on the overall planting plans to give you an idea of how they compare. So proposed is on top and the current is on the bottom. And then one more, please. There. So I do want to be clear about the overall intent of what this plan, what the request tonight does and does not do. So what it does do is try to provide a little bit of additional space to allow for the development of those 4 out parcels. And it is not, what it does not do is try to increase the visibility of those buildings from Jefferson Road. And it does not in any way deviate from the original intent of the plan, which is to have those buildings face inward. I would like to say that we do appreciate staff's analysis and their opinion, but would disagree with their conclusion. The reference back to the original New Urbanist plan, I think is not the correct analysis or the correct starting point. I think that this plan, what it offers is very much in line with the approved 2009 plan. I would like to offer the opportunity for the developer to come up and present if you'd like me to say anything.
Good evening. My name is Evan Conder. I'm with the applicant Village of Oak Grove LLC. As Mr. Griffin alluded to earlier, this development has gone through many cycles and many phases over the last several decades. The original plan, when contemplated, there was a parking garage incorporated on a highly densified corner that over the years, the economy went through the cycle that it did, and ultimately the site was designed for a grocery store, and that's ultimately what has landed on this project. There are several site amenities, if you will, that were offered up in the original plan that we have tried to stay true to as best as possible with the Village Green and the Plaza area. And we feel like we've developed a beautiful shopping center that hopefully the community will be very proud of. The difficult part about a PD zoning, as Mr. Griffin also alluded to earlier, is locking in specific designs early on in the process is a challenging thing for a developer. And that's why we come to you later on to ask for concessions. In the last planning commission meeting, some of the concessions that we were asked were to remove the signage that we were asking for at the time, the building signage and the monument signage. At that point, we were requesting a 15-foot buffer reduction. Tonight, we have dropped all of the signage as well as asking for a 10-foot reduction in the buffer. What you see on the screen is what we believe to be a more densified landscape plan. We do not feel that this degrades the quality of the buffer by any means. One of the recommendations for denial was based on the swapping of parking for landscaping. And if you look at this development from an overall standpoint, we are well above the tree canopy requirements in the city of Athens. I think the requirement is 40%. We're over 50, I believe. So there's very much a strong vegetative buffer that exists today on the property. The other comment was about Jefferson Road. Jefferson Road is a highway. It's Jefferson Highway. The speed limit, I think, is 55. When we submitted this development, the city asked us to erect a traffic signal. Traffic signals slow down traffic, and that's exactly what is happening here today. We have erected a traffic signal, and it will be in full operation when the grocery store opens. So we've heard the response from the commission from the last meeting. We've offered up the concessions that we hope that you will listen to tonight. And lastly, the plan that exists today, and if you would you go back a slide or two that shows the comparison between the two plans? The bottom plan that you see orients the buildings away from the shopping center. It places the drive-through windows towards Lavender. What we're offering tonight is to place the front doors back to the original intent of the master plan, which was to face it inward. So the arrows that you see place the front doors inward, which we're agreeing to go back, we're conceding on to go back to the original intent. So based on all of those items, we kindly ask for your approval, and we are here to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you. We'll move to the public comment portion of this meeting. Would anyone, and this is a reminder, if you sent an email or written correspondence, we did all receive that, but you're more than welcome to speak at the meeting, even if you've sent a letter. So is there anyone here who wishes to speak in favor of this application?
Of course, in favor of the,
In favor of this application?
Yep, in favor of the application.
Okay, why don't you come to the podium and you can ask it.
On the buffer, the green spot, is that Jefferson Road or Lavender?
The green part?
Yes, green,
The southern portion, you see the red dot? It's Lavender. This is Jefferson,
that's Jefferson Road, okay.
right there.
All right, what I'm getting at, the property behind the public staff going down, King Circle, right off of Lavender, will they be building any kind of sound barriers there?
Yeah, there's a requirement. They're not asking to change that buffer between the neighborhood and the back of the grocery store. That was a combination 25-foot undisturbed buffer, 50-foot planted. And in some of the areas, they've retained more than 25 feet. In some areas, there is no 25 feet conserved because of what happens in neighborhoods that tend to extend backyards into woods. But there is a requirement at the line point between the 25-foot and the 50-foot buffers to erect a wooden fence down the entire separation. So I think it's a 6-foot wooden privacy fence that would be, if you look out there now, there's some survey flagging.
Right.
That's where the fence is going to go.
Right, that's what I was getting at, during the building of that complex. We kind of incurred, I don't know, some damage and stuff. First of all, we incurred a lot of damage in the windows. And that's what I want to know, if they were gonna have a sound barrier there. Let's see what-
Before you continue, can I get you to state your name and address for the record?
Yeah.
Could you please state your name and address for the record?
Hey, my name, John Dunn. I'm with Helen Sims, 140 King Circle. And we just in a restaurant, know what's going on. 'Cause we, like I said, we encourage some damage from there on our vehicles and also to the windows of our house. Yeah. That's what my windows sound like now. Every time something on the side or that go by. I don't want like that before they start. I'm just saying, that's what I want to know, if they're gonna have some sound barriers after everything get completed.
Okay.
I'll need
You want my cards?
to know what direction I need to go in and talk to someone about.
Sir, I'm gonna go get one of my cards for you, and if you want to call me tomorrow and set up a time.
Okay.
Either tomorrow or first of the week, I'm happy to sit down with you and go through the plans and show you what they're gonna do and not do.
No problem.
I'll go get it.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Okay, is anyone else here to speak in favor of the application? Great. And is anyone here to speak in opposition to the application?
Oh, my name is Ellen Green. I live at 161 Thornhill Drive. Unfortunately, most citizens are not aware of zoning and plan development changes that are made directly, even though it may affect their life. Instead, we trust in our planning commission, our commissioners and mayor to make decisions for us, believing they will act in the best interest of the citizens they represent. A number of years ago, a controversial decision was made by our government to allow the green belt surrounding our county to be encroached by a new development envisioned as a shopping village. It was to be thoroughly screened from the road by heavy vegetation while providing shopping opportunities for nearby residents. The zoning to allow the proposed development passed on a split vote, even though a county commissioner notably called it the right project in the wrong place. Over the intervening years, a succession of developers has been able to pass incremental changes to the planned development without much notice from the nearby residents until the village at Oak Grove no longer resembles a quaint, insulated village, but morphed into a large, conspicuous strip shopping center catering to the commuters on the Jefferson Road corridor. Our planning staff here has done a very good job, commendable job of laying out all the reasons why they think that this amendment will be detrimental to our community. And I won't go over those same because you know them, but I just want to say that I'll let that report speak for itself. And I believe now that the citizens in our area have recognized what has happened to this development. They now believe it is the wrong project in the wrong place. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
You got it, Dave.
Lee Epting. I live at 1800 Crescent Lane down the Jefferson Road. I spoke last time against this because I don't understand why we have a planned development, why you can start 20 years ago with what Alan just said and how you end up with this. Little by little, you guys have continued to chip away and take and take and take and add things to it. It is not what it started. And if anyone had integrity, they would not come in here and ask that you take the last thing that we had. This is the last thing to the PD, the border around it. Will you put up the other screen with the trees on it? Can you do that? If you look at that, if you look at this right here, it takes 47% of the trees away, 45, whatever it is, on Jefferson Road. Now, this looks real good right now. It looks like you're looking all at the same thing, but you realize if these are oak trees, these look like magnolia or something. If these are oak trees in here, oak trees grow up like this and they spread out and they touch and they make a solid barrier, a solid barrier. They don't look like this, like Christmas trees and a Christmas tree phone. But developers do this, and Justin, I agree. You're in here to work for him, and I understand that is your job.
Make sure to direct your comments to the planning commission. Yep.
Justin is in here to do a job, and I respect that, but that's not truthful. That would be 90% a barrier. When it grows up, it's going to close it, and you're not going to see in there, and you're not supposed to. So I think that is unfair to throw something out here. It looks real pretty on paper. A PD is made to protect us. It's supposed to guarantee that when you do that, that we, the community, get what they said they were going to do. They've taken everything from the beginning all the way down. Oh, gotta go. All right. The changes of the parking and the templates of the buildings are to make it so that it's good for more, McDonald type things there. That wasn't in the thing originally, but when Publix came in there, Publix needed the window to give access for the pharmacy. And so that made sense to change it. Once they got that, then they all of a sudden have fast food restaurants because they get the same thing Publix gets.
Okay, I'm sorry, your time's up, but thank you.
All gone.
Hi, I'm Andre Terry. I live at 175 Bolton Creek Road for 35 years now. I'm across the street and across the railroad tracks and across the old Jefferson Road from the development. And since the development started, I can hear the construction when I'm outside. And I really hope and appreciate your voting to keep the buffer at its planned depth so that maybe I won't hear anything else from the development as it is. I don't mind hearing the train, but that's all I hear. And right now, it's like they're building next door to me and I'm a half mile away. So I'd appreciate having the buffer. Right now, there's nothing there but, soil and the machines. And I appreciate your consideration. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Ashley Epting, I have property at 170 Crescent Road. There was a podcast that had, I wish I remembered exactly what it was talking about in terms of the terminology, but I think it's called 99% Invisible. And I was talking about different communities at different times, and there's a wonderful version of it where it's talking about when the difference between a street and a highway and a road. And that poor developments sometimes happen when the clear purpose of one gets jumbled up with another. It's been fascinating to hear the thought that has gone into that corridor. And having that purpose of getting people and things from one to the other. And so to have a jumbled up version, I think really does change the intention. And certainly over 20 years, things change. But the integrity with which we've got of holding ourselves and each other and you all in our community to stick by some things and to put some pressure on there, I think is worth meriting. So I hope you don't cut out those 10 extra feet.
Thank you.
My name is Len Sapera. I live at 205 Walton Creek Road. I'm afraid you're going to deny this.
Anyone else?
Hello. My name is Anthony Teams. I live at 135 Walton Creek Road. We're kind of new to the area. We moved here from Maryland. And we really enjoy the nice quiet that we have now. Although we're much closer than most of these folks to the development. Now we can hear the traffic on the highway. And we hear the train. But I would like to limit the noise as much as possible. And I think retaining the existing, the buffer in the existing plan would help to do that. And it also improve the appearance. I drive by there several times a day. And I would like for it to look much like it did before they started development, to the extent that that's possible. So I oppose the plan. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Sarah Williamson. I live at 3 Oak Grove Road. I live in Oak Grove. And I've seen this beautiful area of woods demolished and these many apartment buildings put up and this big shopping center go in. And I think at the very least, we need to have as large a buffer as we possibly can. It's not going to replace what was once there, but at least it will provide for those people who live in the area. It will give us some semblance of what we once had. And I think the more oak trees you put in Oak Village, I think is a good thing. So I would vote against ask you to against the proposed plan. Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, great. Thank you. We'll bring it behind the rail for planning. Oh, would you like to take your 2 minutes? Sorry.
Thank you. Just a couple of quick. So one of staff's recommending conditions calls for the replacement and the planting plan or the TMP of oak trees. So right now along the front buffer along Jefferson Road, they're spaced approximately 1 every 50 feet per center line. The staff recommends 1 per 30, which is fine. And then the 20-foot buffer along Lavender, I think the new proposed TMP does remove those. And I think that we're okay with a condition that would restore those oak trees back to whatever density the committee feels appropriate. So I would say that, however, both of those buffers were redesigned. Just understand that while oak trees are nice and they are big and provide a certain screen, they are deciduous. So in the wintertime, the leaves are going to fall off. They're also going to limit the growth of the understory as well. So spacing them too close together could have an impact. Just consider that when you're making a recommendation, should you consider to impose a condition. And another thing I would like to reiterate also that the proposed plan does in fact swap one of the approved quick service restaurants for a retail space. So that did alter the parking calculation a little bit. People are concerned about the overall uses. Right now, that it is approved for three quick service restaurants and one medical office, and the proposal would give you two quick service restaurants, a medical use, and retail space. Thank you.
I forgot to mention in the presentation that there, should you choose to approve, there are conditions that we would recommend, as he just mentioned, that there are conditions at the bottom of the staff report that we would recommend you consider if you choose to.
Okay, go ahead. Could we, is there a slide with those conditions? Okay, that's fine.
Those are the conditions at the top of the last page. Is that right? Okay. Okay.
Lucy. I think it's a pity that we were not provided with the original site plan of the PD Stonson did. Was it 20 years ago? Because it resembles this in no way, shape, or form. It just doesn't. And I think that some of the speakers have mentioned they didn't actually use the term, but bait and switch, because I think that this has been eroded over time. One of the big selling points at the very beginning was there might be a grocery store, but it was small scale. And I can't tell how big this one is, but it's definitely not the size that they were originally talking about. I think we're talking about roughly the Earth Fair size. And it basically was almost like a Tuscan village that had been designed to be in this space and to experiment in new urbanism, which was not something that had occurred in Athens at the time. And Rex took it and ran with it, and he made the design. And it started to be built. And then I think the developer might have been Denny Hill, sold the property. And all of a sudden, there started to be changes made. And I actually might have been the planning commissioner that said, because I remember this very, very well, it's the right development in the wrong place because it wasn't green space. And new urbanism really should be created, not out in whole cloth green space, but it ought to be created in areas that are close to other areas so that they're all walkable. I can't support one more change that would change this buffer. I think that's a very bad idea. And I agree with the comments that were made that the figures that you saw of trees, they look more like Leland cypress than they do like an oak tree or like oaks or an oak forest. So I won't be able to, I will vote to deny this request.
Okay, we'll go with Joey and then Sarah, then Kristen.
I can make a motion, no.
Sure.
I'll make a motion to deny.
Okay. And, okay. Okay, so do you want to continue discussion, Joey?
I
mean, you're welcome to, is really what I'm trying to say.
I mean, Robert's rules, we gotta have a motion to have discussion, but we have discussion before motions a lot of times. I will say this, I don't know right now whether I will vote to approve or not. I do know things 20 years ago, there's a lot of developments in Athens that was wrong 20 years ago, and I wish they would have been done right. But who knows from 20 years from now what we're looking at and what we approve of how that will be. So I don't get tied down to things that were done 20 years ago and that it's different now, because I think in all of our businesses, I think, and I know several of your businesses out there, they're completely different today than they were 20 years ago. Mr. Epting, I know your catering business is completely different and evolved. So I do know how things like that would be, how things have changed. So, and I do caution the oak trees when I hear that, because we look at buffers, and when these trees get tall, you're losing a lot of that underneath buffer, and a lot of these trees won't allow things built underneath. You got to have the right tree for the right underneath planting. So I don't necessarily look at the extra 10 feet as taking away part of buffer and what they're proposing. I would like to hear more commissioners talk through things to see what we're actually looking at. Because I mean, I look at from 50 to 40, you can hold a sound buffer, you can go test buffers 50 feet to 40 feet and see what the decimal of sound is going to be. And I don't think you're going to see and you're going to hear a drop in sound buffering from those. So I'm looking at it more, looking at the land and the elevation and see what is actually appropriate for this spot. I do live right off of here. I don't live very far from there, so I'm very familiar with this. I have heard construction's going on, but you're gonna hear construction going on when construction's going on. And once that's done, you won't hear that anymore. You're just gonna hear the traffic that you already normally hear. So I would like to hear more comment if commissioners want to, or we can take a vote. That's up to the.
I think we had two commissioners over there, Sarah and then Katie, or I'm sorry, and then Kristen.
Do we see that that Christmas tree farm slide again? Yeah, the back. Yeah, that one. Just wanted to look at it a little closer. I thought I'm not a fan of this slide for the reasons that were pointed out a lot. Nothing appears to be an oak tree on there. I also think that the choice of time made here was made very strategically, and you know, a picture's worth 1,000 words, but you get to choose what they are. 5 years is a really interesting time frame to be looking at when we're talking about live oak trees specifically, I think. And I'm just not, I feel like I cannot trust this at all. So I looked at the numbers. On buffer A, you know, we're going from 27 oak trees to 15. We're going from 215 anise to 104. 157 magnolia to 57. This is what I'm seeing when I'm looking at the total quantity from the proposed to from the approved to the proposed. And if anyone is sure that I'm doing something crazy, please speak up. But the cut 198 myrtle to 97. This makes it look like we're not losing really anything at all. The proposed buffer looks like it has more trees in it almost. The numbers are astounding here. I feel like oak trees are gonna get tall and so then there won't be a thick understory is a bit of a misdirect, because by the time the oak tree gets tall, like mature, by the time we have a mature oak tree, this is going to be the Publix might not even be there anymore. This is gonna be a 50-year, 20 to 40-year-old development. And, hopefully not as many people will be driving cars, but that is beside the point. I'm not too worried about the height of the oak tree impacting the density of the buffer. I am concerned about, if you can't just swap out an oak tree for, a holly, because of what it's going to look like in 20 plus years. Yep, I'm not sold that this needs to happen. 40 more parking spots. No. I didn't hear anything convincing about why this needs to happen. So that's my 2 cents.
Yeah, I have a question for staff. As far as parking goes, with I see that we have the table on the updated plan with the parking, but I wasn't sure in terms of required parking and provided parking, like where does the current plan fall?
Current plan, it's got less, certainly. I don't know that I've gone back and done a comprehensive.
I mean, I'm just curious, because I'm just looking at like the minimum and maximums versus the provided.
And it's hard to tell with some of the out parcels, and it's the same with the proposed plan. With quick service restaurant, for example, there's an option for square footage versus number of seats that drives your minimum parking requirements, but then you can increase it by 50%. And if you've got a quick service restaurant like one like a Waffle House that may have on certain shifts a large number of employees working, they get an additional space for those. And so until it comes in exactly what it is and how many seats, we don't.
There's still wiggle room in terms of what would actually be required.
The majority of the parking on the out parcels, as shown on the proposed plan, appears to be above certainly the minimum.
Okay, that was really.
Like something that would be more than they could have based on their needs and their employees.
I mean, I guess.
Don't know that yet.
Yeah, because I was just curious, like in terms of what sort of penciled in and what the minimum parking requirements are. The plan as we have it now meets the minimum parking requirements.
As far as I know, yes. And well, Stephen, do you know any more? It does?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think the proposal goes above on at least one of the out parcels. They're going above, but they're not going, as you just explained, they're not going above what they are allowed.
Right, okay. Yeah, I'll be honest, since ever since seeing the stat about losing the oak trees, I just have a running joke in my house of the subdivisions named after the things that were removed by the subdivision. So, yeah, that's all I have.
I had a couple questions. I'm just curious, what was the speed of Thompson Road when this was approved? Was it?
Yeah, it was, I couldn't tell you. It was probably still 2-lane, I would think back then. And because it was widened during Mayor Davison's tenure. So it was before that, I think. I mean, probably 55.
Isn't it 45 right in that area?
It shifts right there at Lavender, I think.
And it is 45 till that sign, because I have gotten a ticket and the guy said, you are not 55 until you pass the sign, not when you read it. It is 45 all the way past Oak Grove. I know that for a fact.
No, I'm just curious about it. And then the other thing I'm not super clear on, or I would just like to be clarified for us, is that you mentioned this in agenda setting and then it was sort of addressed during the applicant's presentation, but what opportunity does this change provide in terms of the orientation of the buildings on those 4 parcels? Like how might that do this? Or what opportunity does this change give us to fix that?
If you were to approve it and impose specific conditions regarding the orientation to be modified, it gives them a lot more to lean on legal standpoint, if and when these out parcels come to development than what I've got right now. You know, the intent was that they are to be oriented in. You know, for example, the corner out parcel on the top, the proposed plan is clearly a McDonald's. I mean, that's what McDonald's, that's their design. Those are the 2 drive-through windows. And so the first arrow that you see right there is where you pay. I mean, that's not the front orientation of that building. And so they've got an arrow on it that says it will be. But when we get to the point of going through permit and development review, and I try to make them flip the building from what's shown on a plan stamp binding because there's an arrow, attorneys are going to come talk to me, and they're going to have a very different opinion of what I have the authority to do based on a plan that's stamp binding that has that orientation. And to approve it, you could add a condition that all of the out parcels need to be redesigned to clearly orient the front facades of the uses to the internal portion of the development. And a condition carries far more weight with me than the arrow, unfortunately.
Got it. Okay.
That's not a fault of the developers. They're attempting to do that, but the design has not changed.
Okay. Last question. Are the plants that we see in both the existing and proposed buffer new plants?
Yes.
Is that all new
Yes,
plants?
all new plants.
Okay.
Yep.
I have a few things, a few comments. So some of the things that I'm considering with this development is the sound barrier is significant. However, the light pollution. From what I'm seeing, it looks like the parking lot also faces some of the residential homes. So the cars coming in, parking at night, back and forth, to me, that's an issue. Also, out of curiosity, I looked online and from a safety standpoint, I'm concerned. May 22nd, 2019, car crash. May 2nd, 2020, collision. December 21st, 2021, car crash. November 27, 2022, car crash. So to me, as much safety barriers as we need should be allocated for this space. And for me, aesthetically, it's also not pleasing to the existing neighbor. So it's a denial for me.
Motion and a second on the floor, Madam Chair.
So I can just call for the vote. Okay. Okay, I think we'll do a roll call vote.
This is for denial.
For denial,
So-
yes. The motion is to deny the request.
Right. Clear?
All vote. Gehring,
Yes.
Goodrum,
Yes.
Paul,
Abstain.
Morales,
Yes.
Pass,
Yes.
Rowland,
Yes.
Sanders.
Yeah.
Tucker.
No.
Motion passes 6 to 1.
Motion to deny the request passes. Okay, thank you.
It's just a, it's there's report. I have no report. We're off cycle, so I will have 2 sets of reports for mayor and commission action at the next meeting.
Great.
That's all we have.
Adjourn.
So
All in favor of adjourning, please say aye.
Aye.